Thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. As always, make sure you're subscribed. Check out the subscription button down there and then the bell icon. Make sure you're getting notifications, like, comment, and share. Once again, I love comments, whether you like what I say or not, pushback, affirmation, whatever it is that you think I need, or critique of the way I do the videos, whatever. I don't mind. I look forward to it, quite frankly. Especially from people who disagree. So what are we going to be talking about tonight? And I say tonight because my videos always run at night. So if you're watching this in the middle of the night or early morning or during the day, sorry if that throws you off on your schedule. We're going to be talking about malice and free speech. And in particular, we're going to be talking about malice and free speech from the perspective of public servants, elected or appointed. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at one of a few incredibly astounding cases where the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in 1964 in a case where a county commissioner, or maybe it was a city commissioner, we'll get there, sued the New York Times for libel, and initially kind of had the traction and ended up losing. And it sets a tone for where we are in the United States right now. And here's why I say that. If you're paying very close attention, public servants, elected and appointed public servants, are in a position right now where they are using their position to silence dissent. It's happening all over. And some of it is through, you look at videos of school board meetings. School boards are literally turning off microphones during public comment times when people begin to speak out against the school board in a way that they don't like. There's a video out there of a man, and I'll link to that in the description of this video. There's a video of a man taking a school board to task and actually reading from an email chain where the director of equity of the school said that they are going to be doing, or something along that lines, they're going to be doing their level best to start hitting the mute button more preemptively during school board meetings when people come to speak out against the agenda of whatever it might be. And in this case, I believe a lot of it has to do with critical race theory. And I know a lot of the pushback into school boards right now is also centering around the forwarding of the agenda to inculcate and indoctrinate our children with deviant views on sexual education. And school boards don't want to have that anymore. We're seeing it in city council meetings. We're seeing it in county commission meetings where people are being silenced, and they're being threatened with lawsuits. They're being threatened with criminal action. They're being threatened with investigations and whatnot. And I just keep getting stories forwarded to me constantly. People are like, "Hey, TC, what do you think of this? Hey, TC, what do you think of that?" And like, we have to begin to comment on these things. We have to speak out. I have a friend here in Southeast Minnesota that's calling for support to show up at a school board meeting on, I think it's Monday of next week in this region, because they're tackling the school board, not literally physically, they're tackling the school board and speaking out against the agenda that's being forwarded into the schools of the Marxist ideology that comes with the radical sex ed agendas and critical race theory and things like that. And they need support there, because if you show up on your own, they'll silence you. And so I was talking to a gentleman from where was it? When I say talk, obviously a lot of this is messaging. I was talking to an individual through a messaging app, and it was telling me that he was threatened by a public servant with litigation for speaking out and saying that the public servant was wrong on something, and called this public servant a Marxist. And this public servant threatened to sue him for libel. I've had other people that were threatened with slander accusations. And there again, as we've seen in the case of Green Beret that was approached by federal agents last year, and as the story has continued to break, the federal agents used social media content where this person had been speaking out on several levels about things that were happening at the federal levels and at the governmental levels, speaking out, and they threatened him with investigation if he wouldn't comply with their request for him to infiltrate certain groups. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that our freedom of speech, even though the government would say, well, we're not actually saying you can't say these things, we're just saying that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Or public and elected servants are pushing this narrative that somehow you've insulted them, somehow you have demeaned them, somehow you have belittled them, and you're not allowed to do that. So let's take a look at the case of the New York Times versus Sullivan. And this decision came down in 1964. So I'm going to do some dry reading here, but I want you to bear with me, okay? The Supreme Court reversed a libel damages judgment against the New York Times. The decision established important principle in the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and press may protect libelous words about a public official in order to foster vigorous debate about government and public affairs. Okay, let that sink in. The Supreme Court ruled in this case. They reversed a libel damages judgment against the New York Times and established an important principle that the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and press may protect libelous words about a public, I'm going to insert the word servant, in order to foster vigorous debate about government and public affairs. All right. So this landmark decision constitutionalized libel laws and arguably saved the civil rights movement. Sullivan, New York Times company v. Sullivan began as a lawsuit against the newspaper for mistakes in a full-page civil rights fundraising editorial advertisement in 1960 entitled "Heed Their Rising Voices." The advertisement protesting the treatment of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. by Alabama law enforcement carried the names of prominent civil rights activists, including actors, writers, ministers, and other prominent Americans. The lawsuit was filed by L.B. Sullivan, an elected city commissioner in Montgomery, Alabama, whose duties included supervision of the local police. Under Alabama law, Sullivan only needed to prove that there were mistakes and that they likely harmed his reputation. A jury awarded him $500,000 in damages, an enormous sum at that time. The Supreme Court unanimously, you have to understand this, unanimously reversed and dismissed the damage award. And so writing for the majority, which was all of them, Chief Justice William J. Brennan opined that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that vehement criticism and even mistakes were part of the price of a democratic society that a democratic society must pay for freedom. The advertisement had gotten wrong the number of times Martin Luther King Jr. had been arrested in Alabama, 4 times instead of 7, and details of police actions at Alabama State College. So, to protect open discourse, the court adopted the actual malice test, meaning that no public official could win damages for libel without proving that the statement was made with knowledge that it was false or with reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. The court intended for this to be a high standard, one that public officials would have a hard time satisfying, one that required conduct by the news media that went beyond just negligence. Catch that? It had to go beyond negligence. Moreover, the court made clear that the public official suing for damages had to prove the existence of actual malice by convincing clarity. Human terms here. If you're speaking out against public servants, elected or appointed, they cannot penalize you for that. They can't sue you for that. They can't bring the weight of law down on you. They cannot threaten you. They can't
This is
say we're
happening
going to
over and
sue
over
you
and over.
across the United States because they're not used to being resisted. They're not used to being stood up to. They're not used to being told you're not going to do this. They're not used to being told you can't silence us. They're not used to it. And so what this says is that the burden of proof is on them to prove that you willfully and with actual malice intended to cause harm. Intended to cause harm. In the video that I'll be linking, the man speaking to the school board said to them, as long as it doesn't matter the tone that I use. I can say whatever I want and you can't shut me down. And that's what they're trying to do. And that's the thing. Like, if you're actively advocating for violence against someone, you do not have the liberty to do that. There's no liberty in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, in the First Amendment. There's no liberty to actively advocate for violence against individuals. And I have said on this channel, I have said in my content over and over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum, I do not advocate for violence, but I do advocate for public servants being held accountable. And that's what the man said in that video. And in that video, he demanded that the person that the school board, that he was there to talk to the school board about, be immediately fired. Immediately fired. You need to understand this. You need to be doing this. You need to be taking these, if you want to call it a call to action, you need to take these calls to action because you're protected. According to a 9-0 ruling by the Supreme Court in 1964, you can call for action against public servants and public officials if they're calls to action that are not denoting violence. And how they feel about it doesn't matter, according to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, there's no such thing technically as precedents or court or case law. Technically speaking, in the Constitution, there isn't. But when the Supreme Court makes a ruling and then they set a bar, you better be damn sure that they mean it. In the other Supreme Courts, other courts are not going to be, especially lower courts, are not going to be able to come in and undo what the Supreme Court has said. Now, we have to be careful. We don't want the courts legislating from the bench, but they have a right, they have an obligation, I dare say, to actually establish bars that need to be met by public servants, elected and appointed public servants. They have to do that. If they don't, then the public servants can run roughshod all over us. And there again, we can see over and over and over again where they have gotten away with this in years past, even since 1964. They have gotten away with this. They do whatever they want and they threaten you for your actions. Well, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. If you're not careful, you're going to land yourself in jail. If you're not careful what you say. It could be interpreted this way. It could be interpreted that way. And there again, these are the messages that I'm getting from people every day. Every day, people are like, I spoke out. The mayor blocked me on her Facebook page. The mayor said, I had a guy was commenting on a mayoral Facebook page, and the mayor basically said, "You're harassing me." No, you're a public servant in the public eye with a mayor of such and such a city. You don't get to say you're harassed when people speak out against you. And I told him, like, you have to be firm in that. You have to be resolute. They don't get to block you and they don't get to accuse you of things that you aren't doing. Now, if you're like showing up at their house and you're throwing rocks at the doors, or you're literally standing in the middle of their neighborhood screaming and hollering at them at all hours of the day, that's harassment. And that's not okay. But merely holding them accountable, merely calling for someone to be terminated like they did with the school board, that's not harassment. That's not libel. That's not slander. That there's no way for that. And I want you to take note too that what we're seeing over and over and over again across the United States is at city council meetings, county commissions, school board meetings, they're bringing law enforcement in and I pity the law enforcement officers that get sucked into this, and having them remove people out of these meetings during public comment time is saying, oh, you spoke out on an issue that we don't want to talk about today, or you've gone over time, or we've deemed that you're being rude, or you name called, and so that's disorderly and we're going to have you removed. Now, there again, as I spoke about a little bit in my video about Lisa Hansen on Wednesday night of this week, the 23rd of June, as you watch this will be June 24th. There's a place for decorum, especially in a courtroom, and there should be some decorum in a public meeting of city councils, school boards, county commissions, and things like that. But if I get elevated and I get heated and I want to speak out, and you try to silence me, yes, I'm going to get heated. And no, you don't get to call that disorderly conduct. And that's what they're doing. So they're either going to threaten you with lawsuits, or they're going to threaten you with criminal action, because you're not towing the line. You're not towing the line, and they don't like it. But they don't get to do that according to the Supreme Court of the United States. America, wake up. Start showing up at these public meetings. And if they try to take the meetings out of the public, sue them for open meeting law violations. We've got to start doing this. Show up at your school board. Show up at your city. I don't care if your town is 14 people. I don't care if your town is 1,400 people. I don't care if your town is 140,000 or 2.8 million. Show up at your city councils. Show up at your county commission. Show up at your school board meetings. Show up at the meetings, planning and zoning commission meetings. Show up at the meetings and demand to be heard. Hold people accountable. If they're doing something that's wrong, or if you perceive it to be wrong, it is not wrong for you to call for action on that. The Supreme Court has protected you. And if you're acting as a media outlet, they really can't touch you. That is what has to be understood. We, the people, are in charge. The Constitution is over us, and we operate under the umbrella of the constitutional protections of this republic. And the public servants, elected and appointed, have forgotten their places, and they have begun to rule over us as despots and tyrants. They treat us like servants, and they silence us when they do not like what we have to say. And I am here to say, to hell with that. To hell with that. They don't get to do this anymore. They don't get to shut us down. They should be afraid of us. Not in a physical fear, but they should be afraid that we're watching and that we're paying attention and that we are going to say things that they don't like. They have to be afraid. They isolate us and they drive us apart and they threaten us with all sorts of actions, and they tell us that we can't do this and they tell us that we can't do that. Stand up, America. Stand up, Minnesota. Stand up, patriots. Stand up, constitutionalists. Stand up, we the people. Fight for your freaking republic. Because if they silence you, if they shut you down, they can shut down your neighbor, and they can shut down your family, and they can shut down your friends, and they can shut down your coworkers. Look at this case law. If you want to look at these Supreme Court decisions that are out there, they're on your side. They're on your side, but you have got to fight. You have got to fight. You have got to be willing to put your neck out. You have to put your livelihood and your life on the line, and you have got to stand against the tyranny. Do not let them continue to push us around. Don't. So if they shut down TC, who cares? Then you rise up. We need to be the Hydra. We need to be the Hydra. The mythological Hydra. You cut off one head and it grows more. And the only way for them to kill the Hydra was they cut it off and they had to cauterize the wound. And they had to do it fast. We need to be so quick that as they cut one of us down, 8 more are in its place. 8 more of us. Breathe fire on them, patriots. Not physically, but breathe out words of fire. Bring the heat on public servants, elected and appointed. Be respectful. Treat them decently. But when they treat you and belittle you and treat you like you do not have a right, or treat you like you are out of line, or treat you like you are a plebe or a servant or a slave, do not treat them decently. Call them out. Remind them that they work for you. Remind them that they are your servant. Start off respectful. Treat them with the dignity that they deserve as being human beings made in the image of God. But do not think for a minute that that means you have to be demure and panty-waisted and mild. It is time for them to feel the verbal and intellectual, logical heat of their failure. They must begin to feel that, or they will win and we will lose because we will be silenced into compliance. As always, until next time, do not worry about your safety. Don't worry about your livelihood. Fight for your freedom, your liberty, and your happiness. And Sic Semper Tyrannis.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.